Hi again. We all know life's no fun when we have a loved one in addiction. And we all know the fear, the pain, and the chaos. What we don't know, or what you don't know, is how to change that. Here at Help For You, that's what we're all about, helping you overcome your loved one's addiction. Because it will kill you if you don't get a handle on this in a relatively short period of time. I know, I've been there. I had my only child tell me one day that they were using meth and tell me that, you know what, Mum? I'm using it safely. I'm IVing it because the doctors say that's the safest way to use it. Man, I have never in my whole life experienced such a feeling of dread deep down inside me. I've worked in the field of addiction for 23 odd years now, and at that time I knew exactly what that meant for my daughter, but I didn't know how to change it for her. I want to show you what happened to me and what happens for each and every one of us who have a loved one caught up in the cycle of addiction. Your loved one is using. They have a cycle of active use, drinking, drugging, getting out of it, intoxicated, high, whatever you want to call it, getting over it. Maybe once they get over it, there's a bit of calm, maybe not for long. Tension starts to build again. They go looking for more substances. And hello, next thing, they're back drinking and drugging again. That's how it works for someone in active addiction. How it works for people like you and me is that we're caught in that cycle. The addict's the ringmaster to our life. You know what? When they're drinking or drugging, we too are in despair. The abuse that you hear, until you experience it, until you have a loved one in addiction, there is no way you can possibly know what that's like. I didn't, and I've worked with well over 1,000 addicts and their families, but until I experienced it, I didn't know what it was like. You put all your hopes, you put all your expectations into a system that doesn't meet your needs. You've been relying, hoping, waiting, wishing, trying to get your loved one to a point where they say, I don't want to do this anymore. I want change. And if they do come to you and say, I don't want to do this anymore and I want change, you don't know what to do. Ring around everybody, trying to get them into a counsellor, trying to get them into community service, trying to get them into detox, try and get them into rehab. By the time you've done that, window of opportunity is gone. And you know what? For the ones who do get through that complicated process and actually end up in rehab and completing rehab, 85% of them relapse within the first 12 months of completing the program. So this thing about believing that if only I could get my loved one to go to rehab, everything would be okay. Not going to happen. Other thing is, whole new set of problems then for you too. Even if they do complete rehab, the fear, the stress and the chaos of trying to keep them on track and making sure they don't relapse kills your relationship with them and with yourself. It's so hard to go through endless nights worrying. One of the things that turned things around for me from being caught in that cycle where my loved one was the ringmaster was one night when I had a phone call from her and she was psychotic. Couldn't make hide nor hair of what she was saying or what she was doing, but the demons had possessed her, all of those sorts of things, and that was on top of having to weather the vile abuse that came my way whenever she was coming off or using. Those sorts of things, the psychosis, the abuse, until you know what that's like, until you've experienced it, nothing can compare. The pain you feel, it rips your heart out and makes you even more desperate. And that night, my daughter rang me. She was in psychosis. I was as desperate as anyone could ever be, but I couldn't help her. I didn't know how. She hung up on me halfway through. I basically collapsed on the bathroom floor. I was in a hotel. I'd been presenting at a conference that day. And I desperately tried to get hold of her all night. My head wasn't in a space where I was organised and I could think properly. I was in chaos. I was having a breakdown. I managed to get through the night, and I got into the car next morning, 4.5-hour drive home, and I stopped to get a coffee. While they made my coffee, I gave it one last try. Text her, "Hi, hope you're okay." I got a text back. Do you know what it said? It said, "I'm fine. What do you not want to know for?" And that is when I made a decision to turn my life around. It hit me like a ton of bricks. My daughter was living her lifestyle, her way, and it was killing me too. That's when I took 8 weeks off work. I couldn't afford to, but I couldn't afford not to. That's how unwell I was. I got my own therapy, and I knew what I needed because I am a therapist. And, I worked with a colleague and I got well. I've written lots of programs for addicts. I've written lots of programs for families. And the best program, the most important program I've ever written is this one that we offer at Help For You now, because this program is all about you getting well, knowing how to stay well. So self first, getting well second. That cycle that I showed you, the one where you were caught up in this cycle here. Remember that cycle? This was the cycle you need to break. When you can break your cycle of being emotionally reactive to whatever's happening in the addict's life, you can begin to be well. And the other thing that happens is that you actually can change your relationship with your loved one from that emotionally reactive space to one where you can be proactive. And changing that relationship is the key. So you're no longer the mother or the father of a daughter or a son in addiction, or the grandmother of a grandchild in addiction. You can actually know how to parent an addict, or how to be a grandparent to an addict, or a husband or a wife to an addict, because it's important. Addiction steals someone's very soul, and they become someone you never even knew your loved one could be. And I'm sure you know that. So let's talk about step 1, getting yourself well. Step 2, getting well, doing whatever it takes to stay well. Step 3, changing that relationship from that heartfelt connection to a more productive, proactive relationship, and bringing that relationship to one where you don't end up experiencing conflict. You don't experience conflict in yourself. What am I doing? What am I not doing? Is it right or is it wrong? No longer will you experience conflict in your relationship with your loved one or others in the family, because you will be in a space where you can do things differently. And when we're in a space to do things differently, that ripples out and impacts everyone. When you're doing that, it's now time at Help for You to learn how to influence your loved one toward the positive pathway of change.